to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Kind of a slow news day, slow couple of news days for the New York Giants. And we're really not going to have a lot of big news, probably until such time the Super Bowl is over, and then things will start to kick up when we find out who the New York Giants may be moving on from, so on and so forth. And I don't think you're going to get that answer until such time we find out what the cap actually is going to be. One thing that I overlooked that a lot of my subscribers pointed out to me, Mike Florio, I'm going to pull up the text in this video, came out and said, and several others have said, that they think the cap may actually be around where it was this year at $195 million. And if that is the case, well, that would change a lot of things. Of course, I think the Giants right now have to think conservatively. They have to plan for worst-case scenario at 175. But if it is 195, well, that opens up a lot of avenues. You may be able to sign Leonard Williams, Dalvin Tomlinson, and bring in a wide receiver. The other guy that I really want to talk about in this video is Kevin Zeitler, and I'll get more into him throughout the video and why I think it may not be the best of ideas to move on from him, even though he eats up a large portion of the salary cap. I also want to go over some of the needs for the New York Giants headed into the offseason, and if I was the GM, how I would prioritize it. I think most of us agree some of the needs for the Giants, they got needs on both sides of the ball. There's no doubt about it. We need a wide receiver. Nobody's going to deny it. And right now, I am all aboard the wide receiver train. My mission statement going into 2021 for the New York Giants is to have no excuses for Daniel Jones by year's end. I want to know what we have with our quarterback. And I'm rooting for Daniel Jones as hard as anybody, and he needs some help. There's no denying it. As Authentic pointed out on Twitter the other day, didn't see the tweet before I tweeted, but I did see it after the fact. He pointed me to it. The Giants have not drafted a wide receiver outside of Darius Slayton since Daniel Jones has taken the job. I think there's reasonable explanations for that, but I think the time has come. The Giants had a lot of holes. They felt like they needed to prioritize the offensive line first. And I don't want to lose sight of the offensive line, and I don't want to lose sight of the defense, but I am all aboard the wide receiver train. I think the New York Giants need to go out there, and they either need to bring in a prominent wide receiver in free agency, or they have to address it early in this year's draft, probably in the first round at number 11 overall. And there's certainly a lot of high-end wide receiver prospects in this draft that I will be going over. And I could be doing that right now. I could be doing draft profile videos for, Jamar Chase and Devontae Smith, and I'm going to have a video up on one of them tomorrow. I did a film breakdown with Fireside Giants, so be sure to check that out. But I just think the time is a little bit too early. We don't know all the answers yet, and we're going to get more rumors as the offseason picks up. Obviously, after the Super Bowl, that's when you're going to start to find out what the cap may or may not be. But according to Mike Florio, I wanted to make sure I hit home with this, the cap next year could very well be $195 million, and a lot of that has to do with the fact of they feel like the pandemic may be in check by then, and they're confident that fans may be able to go to the stadium. And if that's the case, they actually feel like with new TV deals, the cap could be right around the same area it was this past year. Still not as high as NFL teams were anticipating, but if it's in the 195 range, well, the Giants will have a lot more cap flexibility than we initially anticipated. Right now they're at -2. They'd be at plus 18. And then with some of the moves that they could potentially make, they'd be able to create some cap space. But here is what Florio had to say. Per a league source, the possibility that stadiums will be full for the 2021 season could prompt the league to not tie the hands of teams by dropping the salary cap by more than $23 million per team from 198.2. Although the 2020 season will indeed result in lower revenue than usual, the potential of a return to something normal or close to it, plus the coming TV deals, may result in the league keeping the cap in the range of $195 million. That was from Mike Florio. And I've seen it from several other people as well. So hopefully that's the case. That would be best case scenario for the Giants. Of course, that would result in every other team having more cap space. And one guy I wanted to really point out was one of my best subscribers. He's actually a member on my channel. Sent me an email, William, and I kind of agreed with him when I really thought about it. Most Giant fans right now, rightfully so, want to go out there and spend, and they want to get the best players money could buy. And if you can get Allen Robinson, I am still all aboard the Allen Robinson train. But if you can't sign Allen Robinson, and maybe they feel like they need to sign a prominent edge rusher, if they can't get the highest of the highest ends, which they may not be able to do, much like last year, this is not a normal offseason, especially if the cap's only 175. It may very well be in the New York Giants' best interest to wait out the free agency market and get guys on cost-effective deals that may be a lot more talented than their contract may indicate. Guys like Logan Ryan, it is not going to be a normal offseason. I think we all agree with that. Even if the cap goes to $195 million. Right now, more than half the league is under the salary cap, or right around half the league. That means a lot of players are going to be without jobs if that holds. And if it does, it may be smarter for the Giants to wait it out and try to get guys on cost-effective deals. So that is one strategy that the Giants may want to implement. But if it's 195, the Giants are going to have a lot more options. And how would I prioritize the needs for this football team? Number one is wide receiver. We all agree there. No denying it. But I don't want to lose sight of the other needs on this team. In 2017, the New York Giants did exactly what New York Giants fans want to do. They went out there and they had a really good defense in 2016. Much better than this year's defense. They had probably assumed they'd come back, like I did as a fan, and they would be just as productive, which didn't happen to be the case. And I'm not telling you that we don't have some younger players on this team that may evolve and get better. I'm not telling you that Patrick Graham's not a very good defensive mind, but some of our, best players are veterans. Martinez, Bradbury, they could regress. There's no guarantees there, and they completely ignored the defense. The offensive line they didn't bolster, and they went out there, they got Evan Ingram, they signed Brandon Marshall, and New York Giants fans coming into 2017 were all excited, but when you can't block, and when the defense regressed, the team ended up winning 3 games. Of course, there was a lot of injuries that year as well. And while I recognize we absolutely need to add a weapon, we have to be able to evaluate our quarterback, we can't lose sight of the rest of this football team. And that, for me, starts with the offensive line, and then we're going to get into the defense. Our second and third biggest needs, I think, are on the defense right now in terms of starters, the lineup, right? Corner, edge, you could flip them. A lot of people point to Julian Love. They think he could get the job done. We'll see. He looked good the last game. I still think the New York Giants need to continue to address that cornerback spot because right now there is not a second corner on this roster that I could say I trust going into the year. And maybe you sign a guy like Ross Cockrell or you sign a veteran in free agency to be a Band-Aid for a year until such time you draft someone earlier in the draft. Maybe that's the route the New York Giants will take, but I still think it's a need. And obviously, edge rusher. Yes, we're going to be getting O'Shane Ximines back. And yes, of course, Lorenzo Carter, we hope, will be back and will be 100%. But even with them back, even though I do think it's a scheme-dependent defense, I definitely think we need more talent there as well. Whether or not the Giants prioritize it as a first or second round need remains to be seen. But I do think it's one of our 3 biggest needs on this football team as of now. You can also argue that we could use a coverage linebacker. But one thing I don't want to lose sight of is the offensive line. I think a lot of Giants fans just assume because they spent a lot of draft capital last year on the O-line, it's solved. Well, there's no guarantees on this offensive line. If you look at it right now, Andrew Thomas, I'll give him a guarantee. Looked really good the last 8 games. And Nick Gates. Outside of that, who is a guarantee? You can't say that Matt Barrett's a guarantee. Matt Barrett only had 250 snaps. In the last game that he played, he looked lost. The Giants used him in a limited capacity, maybe because they didn't feel he was ready. And I have no problems going into next year with Barrett being the starting right tackle if the Giants deem that is in the best interest of the team. Of course, it's a Joe Judge guy. But I still think you want to try to add some depth, whether it be in the draft or whether it be in free agency. And on the guard spot, for all the Giants fans talking about we need to get rid of Kevin Zeitler, and I understand it, believe me. He makes $14 million on a $175 million cap. We'll see if it goes to $195. If it's $195, I think we absolutely have to keep him. $175, I think it'd be in the Giants' best interest to try to work out some kind of restructure, maybe extend them for a year to give yourself some more cap flexibility this year. But if you lose Kevin Zeitler, you're asking for a lot. And I don't want to fall into the same trap we fell into in 2017. We can get all the weapons in the world. If we can't block and we can't run the ball effectively with Saquon Barkley, this offense will not flow nearly as much as we want it to. So I think it is in the Giants' best interest to try to find a way to bring Zeitler back. A lot of people think Lemieux's a given because the offensive line started to play better when he got in there. I could just as easily argue that it was coincidental that the coaching change made Andrew Thomas play better because if you look at the film, Lemieux was horrible in pass protection. As a matter of fact, he was the worst graded guard in football, and I don't need to watch film to see that. I saw it during the games, and I'm not knocking Lemieux. He was a 5th-round pick. He was a developmental player. When you take a 5th-round guard, if they become a starter, that's great, but you don't expect it. And hopefully that is the case. Hopefully morphs into a starter. But if you ask me, am I confident going into next year with Shane Lemieux and Will Hernandez, a guy that the Giants didn't feel comfortable putting in the starting lineup over Shane Lemieux, going into next year as my 2 starting guards? My answer is absolutely not. Now, if you were to let Zeitler go, maybe you go out there and you add a guard for a cheaper price in free agency, and we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But I want to make sure Giants fans don't lose sight of the other parts of this team. We absolutely need a wide receiver, and I want to draft one in the first, or I want to sign one in free agency that is a high-end wideout. And I thought William brought up a really good point in terms of being patient. and letting it come to you in free agency, much like we did with Logan Ryan. And I think you'll get, because there's going to be so many players that hit the market, if the cap is as low as they're anticipating, that the Giants, in the end, I think will get some bargains if they're one of the last teams standing. Now, I'm sure some other teams will take that strategy. We'll have to wait and see how it all plays out, but I can't wait for this offseason to really kick it up and get started. Just want to get a quick video up giving you guys my opinions on some of the things throughout this roster. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.